I'll never forget that night. It was supposed to be just another company dinner. Formal, a bit stiff, but nothing out of the ordinary. My wife, Laura, had been looking forward to it for weeks. She'd spent hours picking out the perfect dress, rehearsing the best ways to network with my colleagues, and even asking about my boss's hobbies so she could charm him if the opportunity arose. She always cared about appearances, about being the picture-perfect wife. As we entered the venue, everything felt normal. The restaurant was buzzing with chatter, glasses clinking, and the faint hum of jazz music in the background. Laura looked stunning, her green dress hugging her figure in a way that turned heads, and I felt a familiar sense of pride as I introduced her to my coworkers. She was warm, engaging, and magnetic, everything I loved about her. But something shifted as the night went on. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting across the room more than usual. At first, I chalked it up to the crowd and the noise, but the feeling that something was off wouldn't leave me. Every time I tried to engage her in conversation, she'd give me a quick smile and excuse herself, either to grab a drink, visit the restroom, or chat with someone I didn't recognize. Then it happened. I'd stepped away to speak with my manager about a project, and when I turned back toward the table, she wasn't there. I scanned the room, and that's when I saw her off to the side, near the balcony doors. She wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize, tall with a neatly trimmed beard and wearing a tailored navy suit, was leaning in close. Too close. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe they were just talking. She was a social butterfly, after all. But then he leaned in, and their lips met. It wasn't a quick, casual peck either. It was slow, deliberate, and intimate. The kind of kiss that spoke volumes. My stomach dropped. My legs felt like they'd been replaced with lead, but somehow I forced myself to move. I didn't care who was watching or what it might mean for my reputation at work. I walked straight up to them, my heart pounding in my chest, and said the first thing that came to mind. "You just destroyed our marriage." Laura's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with shock, or was it guilt? The man stepped back immediately, his expression unreadable. For a moment, everything around us seemed to freeze. The chatter of the room faded into the background, and all I could focus on was her face. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Was it pity? Desperation? And then, she said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "You're mistaken." Mistaken? How could I be mistaken about what I'd just seen? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. But before I could say anything else, she turned on her heel and walked away. Just like that, the man followed her without a word, leaving me standing there like an idiot. The rest of the night is a blur. I don't remember how I got home or whether anyone tried to talk to me after that. All I know is that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted with my heart, my life, had just torn my world apart with a single kiss and 6 simple words. And the worst part? I had no idea what she meant by, "You're mistaken." Was she denying it happened? Was she gaslighting me into thinking I'd imagined it? Or was there something even more sinister going on? I spent the rest of that night sitting in the dark, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The kiss, her words, the look on her face. It all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But one thing was clear. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to rest until I got them. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and a crushing sense of confusion. My head pounded from the restless sleep I had finally managed to get after hours of lying awake, replaying the kiss over and over in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Laura's face, first lit up with the laughter that always made me fall in love with her, then that haunting look of pity she gave me before walking away. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. No messages, no missed calls, nothing from Laura. The silence screamed louder than words ever could. Dragging myself out of bed, I made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find some sign of her. Maybe a hastily scrawled note, or even her sitting there with an explanation ready. But the house was eerily still. The coffee pot was cold, the countertops bare. Her green dress from the previous night was draped over one of the dining chairs, like a taunting reminder of the way she'd lit up the room before shattering my world. Where was she? Why hadn't she come home? The questions were like weights on my chest, suffocating me with every passing second. I poured myself a glass of water, but even that felt like too much effort. My appetite was gone, replaced by a gnawing pit of dread in my stomach. I grabbed my phone, half hoping, half dreading to find some explanation waiting for me. Instead, I saw the usual work emails, promotional texts, and a few group messages from my colleagues talking about how amazing the company dinner had been. I stared at the screen, debating whether to text Laura or let her reach out to me first. My pride told me to wait, but my heart couldn't handle the silence. I typed out a quick message. Me. Where are you? We need to talk. I stared at the screen, willing the little delivered symbol to turn into read. But nothing happened. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still nothing. By noon, I was pacing the living room like a caged animal, every scenario running through my head. Was she avoiding me? Was she with him? The thought of Eric, his hand on her waist, his lips on hers, made me want to punch a hole through the wall. But I didn't. I just stood there, helpless and enraged, as the silence in the house grew heavier. The afternoon search for truth, I couldn't sit around any longer. The waiting was driving me insane. If she wasn't going to come home, then I was going to find her. I grabbed my keys and headed out, not even sure where I was going. Her office was the first place that came to mind. She'd mentioned a big project that had been keeping her busy, so it was possible she'd gone in to work things out. Or maybe she just needed a distraction from the fallout of last night. The drive there felt like an eternity. Every red light, every slow-moving car, felt like it was mocking me. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of her office building, I immediately spotted her car. It was parked in its usual spot, a little crooked like she always did when she was in a hurry. My chest tightened. If her car was here, then she was here. And if she was here, then he might be too. I parked and headed inside, ignoring the receptionist's confused look as I walked past her desk. Laura's office was on the second floor, and the closer I got, the harder my heart pounded. What was I going to say? What was I going to do if I found them together? As I reached the hallway leading to her office, I heard voices. Hers, unmistakably, and a man's, deeper, unfamiliar, and far too calm for my liking. My blood ran cold. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was enough to make my stomach churn. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and stepped closer. Their conversation became clearer as I approached the door, which was slightly ajar. "You don't understand," I heard Laura say, her voice strained. "Last night wasn't supposed to happen. I was going to tell him, but not like that." "Tell him what?" The man, Eric, I assumed, replied. His tone was casual, almost smug. "That you're in love with someone else? That you're done playing house?" My hands clenched into fists. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to kick the door open and confront them, but I stayed frozen in place, listening. "It's not like that," Laura said, her voice breaking. "I love John. I do. But this, I don't know how to explain it. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Eric scoffed. "Come on, Laura. Don't kid yourself. You've been unhappy for years, and we both know it." My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. Unhappy? Since when? And why hadn't she told me? The weight of their words bore down on me, each one cutting deeper than the last. "I just need more time," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Eric, let me handle this." "You better," he replied, "because I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever." I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed the door open, and both of them turned to face me, their expressions shifting from surprise to guilt in an instant. "Well," I said, my voice trembling with rage, "don't stop on my account. Please, continue your little heart-to-heart." Laura's face turned pale. Eric stood up, trying to appear nonchalant, but I could see the tension in his posture. "John," Laura started, her voice shaking. "This isn't what it looks like, isn't it?" I shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is." Eric took a step forward, his hands raised as if to defuse the situation. "Look, man, I think we should all just take a step back and— Don't you dare, I interrupted, my voice rising. You don't get to tell me what to do in my own damn marriage. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Laura looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her crocodile tears manipulate me. You, I said, pointing at Eric, need to leave now. And as for you, I turned to Laura. We're going to have a real conversation. No lies, no excuses, just the truth. Eric hesitated for a moment, then grabbed his coat and walked out without another word. Laura sat down, her hands trembling as she wiped at her eyes. I'm waiting, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. Start talking. She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the floor. It's not what you think, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But it's not something I can explain in just a few words. Then you'd better start now, I said, because I'm not leaving this room until I get the truth. Laura sat across from me, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. For a moment, it looked like she was about to speak, but the words didn't come. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. Laura, I said firmly, I've been patient, but I need to hear it. All of it. She finally met my eyes, her face a mixture of guilt and something I couldn't quite place. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she began, her voice shaky. Eric and we started working closely on that new project a few months ago. At first, it was just professional. But then, one night after a late meeting, we went out for drinks. And I pressed, my tone harsher than I intended. And, I don't know, John, she said, throwing her hands up in frustration. One thing led to another. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I let her words hang in the air, the weight of them pressing down on me. Not supposed to mean anything? Laura, you kissed him in front of everyone last night. That didn't look like nothing to me. She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. I know it looks bad. But I don't know, John. I was confused. He's been there for me in ways you haven't. My stomach churned. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She hesitated, then finally said it. I've been lonely, John. You're always so busy with work, and it feels like you stopped seeing me a long time ago. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, a part of me knew there was truth in what she was saying. Still, it didn't excuse what she'd done. So your solution was to run into the arms of another man? I said bitterly. Instead of talking to me? Instead of trying to fix things? I don't know what else to say, she whispered. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I snapped. You've done a hell of a job at that. The silence between us was deafening. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. I need some air, I said, grabbing my coat. We're not done talking about this, Laura. Not even close. As I walked out of her office, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to the story, something she wasn't telling me, and I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the whole truth. I spent the rest of the day driving aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything Laura had said. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it was all too much. By the time I got home, the sun had already set, and the house was dark. Laura's car was in the driveway, but I didn't see any lights on inside. When I walked through the door, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. John, she said softly, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but there's something else I need to tell you. My stomach dropped. What now? I asked, bracing myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. She took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the stem of her wine glass tightly. Eric, he's not just a coworker. He's someone I knew before we got married. What? I said, my voice rising. What do you mean? We dated, John. Briefly before you and I met. It wasn't serious, but when he started working at my company, all those old feelings came back. I didn't know how to handle it. I stared at her, my mind racing. This wasn't just some random coworker she'd developed feelings for. This was someone with history, someone she'd hidden from me all these years. Why didn't you tell me this before? I demanded. I didn't think it mattered, she said weakly. It was in the past. I never thought it would come back to haunt us. Well, it has, I said coldly. And now I have to wonder, was he always lingering in the back of your mind? Were you ever really happy with me? Her face crumpled, and she started to sob. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not this time. Not when everything I thought I knew about our marriage was unraveling before my eyes. The sound of Laura's sobs echoed through the kitchen as I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew. Every word out of her mouth felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the person I'd shared my life with and the stranger sitting in front of me. Was it ever real, Laura? I finally asked, my voice trembling. Was any of it real? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Of course it was, John. I love you. I still do. I scoffed, unable to believe her anymore. You have a funny way of showing it. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice breaking. I never planned for any of this to happen. When Eric started working at my company, it caught me off guard. I thought I could keep things professional. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I missed. Missed what? I snapped. The thrill of being with someone new? The excitement of sneaking around behind my back? No, she said quickly, her voice rising in frustration. I missed feeling wanted. I missed feeling like I mattered. Her words hit me like a freight train. As much as I wanted to yell, to rage at her for what she'd done, I couldn't ignore the truth buried in her accusations. Over the years, I had gotten comfortable, too comfortable. I'd thrown myself into work, assuming our marriage would always be there, steady and unchanging. But that didn't justify what she'd done. So what now? I asked, my voice low. You've destroyed everything we built for some fleeting feeling of excitement. Where does that leave us? She hesitated, looking away. I don't know, she admitted. I don't want to lose you, John, but I don't know how to fix this. Her answer wasn't good enough. It wasn't even close. I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up again. You don't know how to fix this? How about you start by telling me the whole truth? No more half answers, no more excuses. I want to know everything, Laura. She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, she said quietly, but you're not going to like it. Laura poured herself another glass of wine, her hands trembling as she brought it to her lips. She didn't offer me a drink, and I wouldn't have taken one even if she had. I wanted my mind sharp for what she was about to tell me. Eric and I started seeing each other outside of work about 2 months ago, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't serious at first, just lunch here and there, talking about work and life. But then, one night, after a late meeting, we kissed. My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. That kiss should have been the end of it, she said, tears streaming down her face. I told him it was a mistake, that I loved my husband and couldn't do this. But he didn't stop. What do you mean he didn't stop? I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, then looked away. He started texting me more, finding excuses to be alone with me, and I let it happen. I didn't want to, but I didn't stop it either. I was weak, John. I know that. I was weak, and I let things get out of control. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. How far did it go, Laura? She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. It wasn't just the kiss, she admitted. We slept together. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself, the weight of her words threatening to crush me. How many times? I demanded, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. Twice, she said quickly. Only twice, and it was a mistake both times, John. I swear to you, I regretted it the moment it happened. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and cold. You regretted it? Funny, because it didn't look like you regretted much when you were kissing him at the dinner last night. Her face crumpled, and she reached out to me. "John, please. I know I've hurt you, but I want to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I stepped back, out of her reach. "Fix this?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this is something you can just fix? You didn't break a vase, Laura. You broke our marriage. You broke me." She started sobbing again, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, her cries echoing behind me. I needed space, time to think, to process everything she just dumped on me. But as I sat in the darkness of our living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel, one thought kept running through my mind. Was this really the whole truth? Or was there still more she wasn't telling me? The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my body stiff and aching. The events of the previous night came rushing back, hitting me like a tidal wave. Laura's confession, her tears, the way she begged me to forgive her. It all felt like a bad dream, but the emptiness in my chest told me it was all too real. I glanced at my phone, half expecting to see another message from her. But there was nothing. The silence was deafening. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them by sitting around and waiting for her to open up. If she wasn't going to give me the truth, I'd find it myself. I went upstairs to our bedroom. Laura wasn't there. Her side of the bed was untouched, and her car was still in the driveway. Maybe she'd gone for a walk, or maybe she just couldn't face me after everything that had happened. Either way, I didn't care. I had a mission. I started with her phone, which was sitting on the nightstand. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. It was our anniversary date. The irony wasn't lost on me as I typed it in and gained access to her secrets. Her texts were the first place I looked. Most of them were harmless, messages from friends, reminders for work meetings, but then I found a thread with Eric. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, each one worse than the last. "Eric, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Laura, I know. Me too. I wish things were simpler. Eric, they can be. Just say the word, and I'll make it happen. Laura, it's not that easy. John doesn't deserve this. Eric, do you love him, Laura? Or are you just afraid of starting over?" I couldn't read any more. My chest felt like it was about to explode. I dropped the phone onto the bed and took a step back, my mind racing. This wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper, something planned. And for the first time, I realized I might not know the full extent of their betrayal. I stood frozen in the bedroom, staring at Laura's phone as if it were a live grenade. The messages I just read weren't just evidence of an affair. They were a window into a part of her life I never knew existed. A life where I was the outsider, the obstacle standing in the way of what she really wanted. My breathing grew heavier as I paced the room, trying to make sense of everything. Had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just some convenient safety net, while she secretly longed for someone else? The thought made my stomach churn. I glanced back at the phone, a sick curiosity pulling me back in. There had to be more, something that would either confirm or disprove the awful scenarios running through my head. I picked it up and opened her email. At first, it seemed harmless, work updates, newsletters, the usual. But then I saw an email thread labeled, Plans for the Future, and my blood ran cold. I opened it, my hands shaking as I read. "Eric, I found a place for us. The small, but it'll do until we figure out something more permanent. Laura, that sounds perfect. I just need a little more time to sort things out on my end." "Eric, how much time, Laura? You've been saying that for weeks." "Laura, I know, but John isn't stupid. If I rush this, he'll figure it out. Just trust me. I'll make it happen." I dropped the phone onto the bed like it burned me. Make it happen? What exactly was she planning? Was she trying to leave me for him? Was she already planning our life's dismantling behind my back while I was still trying to save it? My hands clenched into fists as I tried to steady myself. Suddenly, I heard the front door open. Laura was home. The confrontation. Part 2. I stormed downstairs, my heart racing with a mix of anger and desperation. Laura was in the hallway, shrugging off her coat. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to apprehension. She knew something was coming. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. Her shoulders sagged. John, save it, I snapped, cutting her off. I went through your phone, Laura. I saw the texts. I saw the emails. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. You went through my phone? You're damn right I did, I said, stepping closer. And I'm glad I did because now I know exactly who you are. John, please, she said, her voice trembling. Let me explain. Explain what? I shouted. That you've been planning to leave me for months? That you've been lying to my face while sneaking around with Eric? What else are you hiding, Laura? Tell me everything right now. Tears filled her eyes as she reached out for me. John, it's not what you think. Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think, I roared, stepping back from her touch. I've seen the messages, Laura. I've seen the emails. I know you were planning to leave me. She crumpled into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I didn't want it to happen this way, she sobbed. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Then why, Laura? I demanded, my voice breaking. Why do this? Why not come to me and tell me you were unhappy? Why not give me a chance to fix things before running off with him? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Because I didn't think you'd care, she said quietly. You've been so distant, John. Always working, always stressed. I felt invisible. Invisible? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. Laura, I've been working to build a life for us. Everything I've done has been for you, for us. And you repay me by stabbing me in the back. She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. Because you've succeeded. Laura's confession should have been the end of it. I should have walked away right then and there, but something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was the hope that she'd say something, anything, that would make this all make sense. Or maybe it was the fear of what I'd find if I kept digging. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and went back upstairs. Her phone was still on the bed, and I couldn't resist the urge to search for more. If she wasn't going to tell me the whole truth, I'd find it myself. I opened her photo gallery, scrolling through the images with a sick sense of dread. Most of them were innocent, pictures of us, family gatherings, vacations. But then I found a folder labeled Work. My heart sank as I opened it. The photos were of her and Eric. Some were harmless, group shots from work events, pictures of their team celebrating a project. But others were far more intimate. A selfie of the two of them at a bar, their faces inches apart. A picture of Laura sitting on Eric's lap, her arms wrapped around his neck. And then the worst one. A photo of the two of them in bed, the sheets barely covering their bodies. I dropped the phone, my entire body shaking with rage. This wasn't just an affair. This was a full-blown relationship. One she'd been hiding from me while pretending everything was fine. I stormed back downstairs, the phone in my hand. Laura looked up as I entered the kitchen, her face pale. What the hell is this? I shouted, holding up the phone. Her eyes widened in horror. John, please. Don't you dare, John, please me, I snarled. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at me with tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, I realized something. Laura wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she'd been caught. I want you out, I said, my voice cold and final. Pack your things and go. I can't do this anymore. She started to protest, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't, I said. Just don't. And with that, I walked out of the house, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. I spent the next few hours driving aimlessly, trying to calm the storm inside me. The anger, the betrayal, the sheer disbelief at how my life had unraveled in a matter of days. It was overwhelming. When I finally pulled into a random parking lot and turned off the engine, the silence felt deafening. I stared at the steering wheel, trying to piece together a plan for what came next. Laura's words echoed in my mind. I didn't mean to hurt you. But the thing is, intent didn't matter anymore. The damage was done and there was no going back. This wasn't just about a mistake. This was about trust, and hers was irreparably shattered. By the time I returned home, it was late. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. Laura was sitting on the couch, her suitcase beside her. She looked up when I walked in, her face a mix of guilt and exhaustion. "I'm leaving," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought it's what you wanted." I stood there for a moment, staring at her. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her feel the same pain she'd caused me. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of trying to understand, tired of pretending there was anything left to salvage. "It is," I finally said, my voice flat. "This marriage is over, Laura. There's nothing left." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, John, for everything." I didn't respond. What could I say? Her apology didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the months of betrayal or erase the images burned into my mind. I just stepped aside and let her walk out the door. The sound of her suitcase rolling down the driveway was the only noise in the stillness of the night. The days that followed were a blur. I called into work, explaining I needed time off to deal with personal matters. I avoided friends and family, not ready to face their questions or their pity. Instead, I threw myself into the mundane tasks of cleaning the house, organizing bills, and packing away anything that reminded me of Laura. But no matter how hard I tried, the memories lingered. Every corner of the house held a piece of her. Her favorite mug in the kitchen, the throw blanket she always curled up with on the couch, the framed photos from happier times. Each one was a painful reminder of the life we'd built and the lies that had torn it apart. One evening, as I was going through some papers in the office, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. It was in Laura's handwriting. My heart sank as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. Inside was a letter. "John, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but I need you to know how sorry I am. What I did was unforgivable, and I'll carry the guilt of it for the rest of my life. I never meant to hurt you, but I know that doesn't matter anymore. You deserve someone who loves you the way you loved me. Fully, selflessly, without reservation. I failed you, and for that, I'll always hate myself. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even if I don't deserve it. Take care of yourself, John. You're a good man and you'll get through this. I truly wish you all the happiness in the world." Laura, I folded the letter and set it aside, unsure of how to feel. Her words didn't absolve her, but they also didn't fuel my anger. They just left me feeling empty. Months passed, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life. Therapy helped me process the pain and the betrayal, and I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, and even started going to the gym. One day, while running errands, I ran into an old college friend, Sarah. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we quickly fell into easy conversation. She'd gone through a divorce a few years back, and talking to her felt like a breath of fresh air. She understood the pain, the healing, and the cautious hope that came with starting over. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner, and eventually something more. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was natural, comforting, and exactly what I needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I began to feel like myself again. One evening, months after Laura had left, I received an unexpected call. It was from her. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what she could possibly want. When I picked up, her voice was hesitant. "Hi, John," she said. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." "I'm fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What about you?" There was a pause before she answered. "I'm okay. Things with Eric didn't work out. I guess I just wanted to say I hope you're happy. You deserve that." "Thanks, Laura," I said simply. "I hope you find what you're looking for too." We exchanged a few more pleasantries before hanging up. As I set the phone down, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Her call hadn't stirred up old wounds or reopened scars. It had simply reminded me how far I'd come. Looking back, I realized Laura's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. It wasn't just her mistakes that had led to the collapse of our marriage. It was both of us. I'd taken her for granted, and she'd looked for validation in all the wrong places. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it made me see the cracks that had always been there. Now, with Sarah by my side, I felt hopeful for the future. I wasn't defined by what Laura had done or the pain she'd caused. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to build something new. Life had thrown me one hell of a curveball, but in the end, I'd found my way back to myself. And that was more than enough.